Lovely to see you all here. We've got today two presenters who will be talking us through chapters 1 to 6 of Projectiology. I think everybody here was here last time. Yeah, we had the introduction last time, chapters 1 to 6 this time, and we have with us Ulysses Schlosser and Tony Muskopf. So I'll just read a little bit about our two presenters today. So Ulysses is a psychologist who graduated from the University of Sao Paulo with a master's degree in contemporary integration in Latin America and working in the penal system of the state of Paraná. He's a volunteer and coordinator of the International Council for Neologistics and Terminology of Conscientiology. He develops research and publications on paraphenomenological methodology. I have to slow down for that word. Cosmo-consciousness, paracognicology, anti-imprisonment, and Guarani culture. Guarani is indigenous culture of the area of Brazil where Ulysses lives, which is Iguaçu Falls at the SEAC. So I really love the practical focus also of Ulysses' work in the penal system and the whole focus on prisons. And Tony Muskopf also has a very practical approach in his work. He's also a psychologist and has a master's in peace and conflict studies. He's been a volunteer of Conscientiology since 1989. Is the author of the book Consciential Authenticity, an instructor and researcher of Conscientiology and Projectiology. And Tony lives in Australia, in Cairns now, and is a volunteer at BiblioAfrica, which is an international not-for-profit organization that aims to donate books of conscientiology around the world, and especially in the African continent. And so both Tony and Ulysses bring each over 30 years of experience of study and research in conscientiology. And I think they're both really perfectly placed to talk to us today about the scientific basis of conscientiology. But before we get into their presentation, just a couple of other things. So just letting everybody know that we are recording now, and we will be recording the discussion, so the presentation and then the discussion, so about the first hour of the meeting. And then after that time, so it's about 40 minutes of presentation and then 20 minutes of time to discuss the topics, either what was discussed here or even just something that might be of interest to you from your own reading of Projectiology. After that, we're going to stop the recording and we will then focus on the experiences, the techniques, the technique that we suggested people practice during the last session. We'll have a bit of a breakout session where we'll all go into smaller groups and just share a bit about how our past month has been of studying the book and applying the OBE techniques. And then we'll be talking about the techniques for this coming month. And so the very first thing we'll just do now, we'll just ask you to do, should only take a couple of minutes before Tony and Ulysses take over. If you just have a look in the chat, I think has already put it in there, Michiko, or did you just put, yeah, Michiko's just put it now. So there's a link there for a brief poll, just for us to get it's just about our experience of all the participants here in, with Projectiology, with the book and Waldo Vieira's other work. Just to help us going on, have an understanding where people are coming from. If there's people that are really new to this work, maybe pitch things, the discussion occasionally slightly differently, or just remember to elaborate more on certain ideas than if we know everybody's been here for studying this work for years. So Michiko, is this telling us this is 11 of 14 have done this, or what's the? Oh, I see.
Yes, sorry. So yes, 15 people have responded so far, and 92% are familiar with the works, and 7% are not.
Yeah. And that might be, I know I'm not doing it at the moment, so there might be some others that aren't doing it either. Alrighty. Thanks for that. And then I will hand over to Tony and Ulysses.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity of being here. First of all, I would like to check if everybody is listening and getting the image properly. It's all okay?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much for this invitation for ISIC team. And thank you very much for everybody who is here to discuss and debate these ideas. It is a privilege, it is an honor to represent and present the idea of projectiology and study more and understand the arguments around this great book. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to see different approaches of this science. We have people here that are not familiar with projectiology, so we also will give good overview about this book. So in these first 6 chapters, we are going to present the foundations, the scientific foundations and definitions of this study, of this science, projectiology. Yeah, it is very hard for us to select the main ideas and present them in 40 minutes. So we try our best to give us like the eye fillet of the main or more special approaches of these chapters. But yeah, it is impossible to cover all details. So the book is there for us to study. So let's try to present the main ideas around this. And please take notes of your questions, and then we can discuss and go into a debate later. Ulysses, would you like to start saying a few words around?
Yes, thank you, Tony.
Our presentation.
I'd like to also to thank you all for the opportunity. I think this is a great opportunity for us all. I hope this movement, this work, the bridge, it may evolve, and this discussion may grow, and maybe we can put together new people, new scientists. And I was thinking about if even in the future we may invite special personalities for to enhance this discussion. So I also feel that for us, maybe for all the teachers, for all the speakers who will participate here, it is a great opportunity for us to go deeper in this discussion. So thank you all. Well, Tony, may I begin?
I'd just like to say something very, very important, which is the disbelief principle. It is important to flag that every time we start a conversation like that. So please, everybody, don't believe in anything we are going to discuss here. Use your self discernment your own experience to check and confirm and analyze every idea, every argument we are going to share here. So I think this is important for every presentation we are doing. It's flag and make sure that you are going to use this principle, okay?
Okay.
Ulysses?
So, dear friends, as you may know, out-of-body experience, it occurs, it happens with everyone. Since humankind began, it may happen. We suppose that. But a group of people decided to study it and to make science. Professor Waldo Vieira, he decided to write and to study the subject and to make it the great goal for his life. And this book, Projectiology, it was published in 1986. And we are now working with a new edition that was first published in 1999. So this chapter, Essential Concepts of Science, the first chapter, it was included in the book in 1999. And if you have the opportunity to read it, you will find a very interesting proposal in this first chapter. First, Professor Vieira, he shows the importance of science. I think that his message to us is to show that projectiology may have a strongly based on science. And that's not easy because, as you may know, science began in our world dedicated to mechanical problems, probably with astronomical problems, material problems. And now we are facing completely different challenge. We are invited to research consciousness, subjective phenomena, especially here, the out-of-body experience. So at first, science was not prepared to investigate this kind of phenomena. And Professor Waldo, he dedicated this first chapter to discuss how science may approach the subject. And if we think about how scientists generally think and act, you may think if we are mature persons to deal with this subject. So the science, the kind of science that we are able to achieve, probably it is incomplete. This notion of incomplete science, Professor Waldo proposes, mainly because conventional science is dedicated to the intraphysical dimension. It investigates intraphysical dimension, the material world. So if we are interested in extraphysical phenomena, science is incomplete. Conventional science is incomplete. So we have a challenge to try to make science a broader approach. How to investigate scientifically the out-of-body experience, the consciousness, a lot of extraphysical phenomena. We may say the extraphysical investigation, how may we investigate scientifically the extra-physical experience? So that is a great challenge. This first chapter is dedicated to prepare our minds to face this challenge. Tony, do you have any remarks in these first words?
Yes, just the idea of projectiology was actually proposed in 1966, before the book. So the idea of the science was created basically in 55 years ago. So we are dealing with very early steps of the science. It's considering in terms of time frame, the projectiology is a child. It's a baby. It's getting like the first chapters of the development of the science. So we have a lot of things to understand and develop in terms of the science.
I would like to remember that it's very common when someone starts to study projectiology, and you may find a lot of criticism about conventional science. And that's true. In this book, Professor Vieira, he develops a lot of criticism on conventional science. But he writes very clearly about the necessity of integration between the new conscientiological science and conventional science. So, originally, Professor Vieira, he doesn't have the intention to exclude conventional science or to say that it's wrong. That's not the approach. The approach is to show the limitations of conventional science and which could be our contributions when we investigate consciousness to science in general. So that's very important because it's very common for us to find conscientiological researchers that use to put conventional science in a very low degree. I think that it's not a very good approach. Professor Vieira, in this first chapter, he puts a lot of contributions from conventional science in a high level. That's very important for us to notice. And in the same way, it's very, very important for us to discuss the limitations of conventional science and put all together to integrate these two approaches. So I think we can move to the second slide. Well, those topics that you may see, we took them from the definitions that Professor Vieira wrote about science. In this first chapter, Professor Vieira, he writes three definitions about science. And we would like to comment a few conceptions about those definitions. I'd like to begin with the last one, when Professor Vieira says about determinant or constituent causes. So science is dedicated to understand causes about facts. And this is a very, very important approach. Today, I understand a little bit better the importance of the causes, because this is a point that makes a great difference from the mystical approach. And mystical approaches, in general, people, they love to think about synchronicities in opposition to the investigation of the explanations and the understanding about the causes of the phenomena. To think about the causes, it may be and the starting point for the scientific thought. When you try to explain something, you may begin questioning, you may begin a clear investigation. So more than that, in those definitions, you may observe that science is a kind of systematic approach, an organized knowledge. It's very important to understand that we may choose an object of research, and that science is based on observation, verification, experience. The basic activity for the scientist is the observation, who may observe facts and phenomena. And the core, the heart of the scientific activity is the method. Without method, in general, we say that there is no science. And the comprehension and the record to register the facts is the daily work of the scientist. So these topics are included in the definitions of science, and they may be preserved in projectiological and conscientiological research. So do you have any comments, Tony?
No,
okay.
Let's go. Go ahead.
Okay, we may change the slide, please. So we may now comment a few remarks on the conceptions of science. As Tony said in the beginning, science is a young approach in humanity. It was created about 4 centuries ago. So we may consider it a human creation with all the limitations of us as human people. And projectiology is much younger. Well, it was created in 1966, but as we may know, the out-of-body experience happens since the human being could recognize himself as someone who thinks and can investigate something. But the proposal of the science was made by Professor Vieira. And if we think about the notion of an incomplete science, it is incomplete at first because science, originally, conventional science, is proposed to investigate the intraphysical dimension. But science exists because there are human beings, the scientists. And we, as human beings, we have our limitations. We have immature behaviors, immature ways of thinking. So this may be an interesting hypothesis that if science is incomplete, that is because the scientists are still immature consciousnesses. So I may include myself in this conception. I may have a lot of immaturities. And it's very hard for us to conceive really a complete science. Science may be always incomplete because we are trying to approach truth. And I think maybe that's not possible to be really completed task. But this notion of incomplete science, it's very important for us to take it as a limitation from the intraphysical dimension. We may change this slide, please. Well, Conventional science has a great contribution, and questioning is the essence of science. And this kind of habit to make questions, if we incorporate this habit, this will be a very great contribution for our personal education. So science can be cheated. And if people can learn from science and the questioning, it may be a very great approach for us to learn. Data and hypotheses are the content of science. And this is some fundamental point, because philosophy doesn't work with data. Philosophy works with ideas. The contribution to work with data, it comes from science. So real facts, to study and to investigate real facts. This is a great contribution from the scientific approach. And to develop hypotheses, really to suppose and to make propositions. That's the essence of the contents of science. It makes a great difference from other lines of thought and other approach in humanity, like religions, mysticism, philosophy itself. So science is very special for these two components, data and hypothesis. In the book, Professor Vieira, he wrote a list of 18 characteristics of science. I would propose for you to read them, but I would call your attention to maybe 3 or 4 of those characteristics. For instance, the prediction, the proposal of science to make predictions. So science may be very important if we can talk about the future. And also the utility. If science is not useful, it doesn't make sense to go ahead with that. So if we want to make good science, it's very important for us to think if it is useful for people. And also the verifiability, the capacity that we have to verify the facts more than twice. For instance, if you have the experience of a retrocognition, if you can remember past lives, and if you have only one experience, it may be not enough for you to consider it a fact, something that you may use to build strong hypotheses. You should at first try to repeat your heterocognitions. If you have a lot of heterocognitions, so you may have the capacity to say something consistent about your past. So to verify facts more than twice is something very important for science in general, and mainly in the conscientiological approach. So the core of science is the method. Professor Vieira, he gives a great value for the modern scientific method, and he wrote it in details in this book. So I would really advise to any researcher in conscientiology And that is very important for us to try to develop a strong method. And in this way, Professor Vieira, he also gives a great value to scientific philosophers. One of them is Karl Popper. And many ideas written in this chapter, Professor Vieira, he studied them with Karl Popper. There is one very good idea about theories, that a theory is given to us for us to try to refutate the idea. So the way to present a theory, it may be very clear to allow other people to disagree. If the theory isn't clear enough, you don't give the chance for other people to disagree about it. So the ideas that we organize in a theory, they must be very clear to give the opportunity to other people to understand it with precision. So we may offer to the other people the opportunity to investigate and to disagree. And the refutation is the way through science may change, and the knowledge may change and evolve. If theories are not clear enough, that will not happen. Okay, this kind of idea was developed by Karl Popper, and Professor Waldo loves it. It's really very important in science. So we may go ahead, please, to the other slide. If you can read in the page 17 of the book, you may find a paragraph. And the subtitle of the paragraph is hyperacuity. And in this paragraph, Professor Waldo calls our attention to a very important consequence of the scientific activity. It is the expansion of consciousness. And you may think, what should be the relation between conventional science and the expansion of consciousness? Well, if we admit that through the way of science, we may get closer to real facts, we should think that science helps us to understand the world. And not only that, to understand our own selves. And if this kind of understanding evolves step by step, more precisely, if we can perceive the world more precisely and also our own selves, this is the way to expand the consciousness. A self-researcher, a conscientiologist that move in the scientific way and develops self-comprehension in a broader way, that is consciential expansion. And so the connection between those conceptions is very, very important, because we may think about the role, the function of science in our world. So maybe there is a kind of investment, of promotion for science from extra-physical helpers. It may be a great interest from evolved consciousness to develop science in our world. Science is very different from technology, from religion, from philosophy, from other activities. In science in general, we may find international cooperation because essentially science works with facts and ideas. And in the heart of science, there is not a kind of money interest. When we talk about money, we may enter in the applications of technology, in the application of science, but in the heart of science, in general, the subject is knowledge. And because of that, there is a consequence of integration between the world community, and it helps to develop a sense of universalism. And also, in this way, it's not possible for us to conceive a secret science because it doesn't make sense. If someone has knowledge, this knowledge makes sense if you are able to share the knowledge. If someone imagine that the knowledge is a private, it is completely private, that's not science. This knowledge doesn't work. So knowledge works if we share the knowledge. So Professor Waldo has a very good approach when he connects the scientific movement with the evolution of universalism in humanity. So we may go ahead, please.
Ulises, may I say just one word regarding this universalistic and open approach of science? Okay, if you don't bring the whole community or the international community of scientists to discuss consciousness and out-of-body experience and other phenomena we are studying here in projectiology, we are not doing a complete science. We are doing an incomplete science. So it is very important for us to be part of these debates and bring other views and put our ideas into a broader discussion around other views, other scientists, and other schools. So this is the real science, and this is the complete science we need to know today.
Thank you, Tony. Just my last comment. Right now, if you read about it in the internet, about robots, there is a great work around androids. And especially in Hong Kong, there is right now a factory, and they may put to sell thousands of robots, empathic robots. And when I saw that, I thought deeply in projectiology. Because as Tony said right now, humanity is evolving in science, and projectiology with out-of-body experience, we have a great responsibility to show new horizons, new limits for scientists, because they think that conventional science is the maximum. It's something very extraordinary. And they are now trying to develop, even in robots, something like paranormal capacities, you see? And if we can give a message about projectiology, we may show the value of our consciousnesses and the research with our own bodies, the human body and the energetic body and our extra-physical bodies. So conventional science, they don't look in this direction so far. So excuse me if I was a little bit long. Tony, I think that you may take the word right now.
How many times do you have?
Well, strictly speaking, we've got 8 minutes left. Okay. Maybe we'll make it another 15.
All right.
And then we'll have 50 minutes for discussion.
Let's speed up and do some magic here in terms of presentations. I will present this chapter 2, which is the new consciential paradigm. And basically, Professor Vieira presents the leading theory of conscientiology, which is a scientific mindset that we use to explain the consciousness, or to understand, or to approach, or the model of reality we understand the consciousness. So this new consciential paradigm is conscientiocentric, which means the consciousness is in the core, in the center of this model, this scientific model. If we have an object, a consciousness as an object of for our study, and if we are consciousness and we are researchers, so the subjects and the objects are the same. So we are studying basically in conscientiology ourselves. So we need a method adapted to this reality. So the self-experimentation is the main tool, the main gadget, or the main lab for us to assess the veracity or the falsity of the hypotheses we have around this self-research. So consciential paradigm is based on this idea, the idea that we are studying ourselves, using ourselves as a tool, as a method, and as a final object in this paradigm. And projectiology is an essential subdiscipline in this whole paradigm, because this is the main phenomena, or the main instrument, or I like to say it's a kind of cornucopia of knowledge, when we can access other dimensions and we can see ourselves from a multidimensional perspective. We can understand and live through our astrophysical bodies, using our astrophysical memories, accessing past lives, seeing the future through other parapsychic phenomena. So the projection of consciousness is the main tool, the main instrument, the main process for us to access and work on this new consciential paradigm. So the experimentation, the practical approach, is something that we can change, or we can do a philosophical approach on projectiology in terms of self-experimentation. This is something that we need to live by ourselves. So nowadays, there is no other instrument, there is no gadget, there is no other high technology that can substitute the self-experimentation. So this is the main thing we need to understand, and this is the main point of the chapter 2. So the challenge is, how can we make more accurate interpretations of our own self-experimentations? How can we make a clear distinction between fake or distorted or fantasies interpretations and the extraphysical reality? So this is something that you need to understand. This is something that you need to discuss more, to develop perhaps more appropriate method in terms of scientific approach for the study of consciousness. So this is a challenge we have now in terms of this consciential paradigm. Ulysses, do you want to add something?
That's okay. Go ahead, please.
Okay, let's go ahead. So in the chapter 3, we have the essential concepts of conscientiology. So in the page 33, Professor Waldo defines the science of defines the conscientiology as a science that addresses the broad study of consciousness. So the entireness of this object is something important for the consciential paradigm as well. So we are saying that we are studying the consciousness by looking at all bodies, the holosoma, the 4 bodies that we are going to discuss in next presentations, further chapters. And we also are studying the consciousness by understanding the attributes of this consciousness, like memory, attention, imagination, like the discernment. There are a lot of attributes. So the scope of conscientiology is basically divided into attributes and the holosoma, which means the whole bodies that we use to manifestate our consciousness. And this happened in 3 basically states: the interphysical states that you are now in our interphysical life, afterlife, the extraphysical state of the consciousness, and the main state of projectiology, which means a transitional state, or the projection of consciousness itself, which can happen even from the interphysical approach or the astrophysical approach. So the projection of consciousness allows us to understand this multiple or this multidimensionality of the consciousness by living, let's say, temporarily from extraphysical perception, even if you are here in the interphysical dimension. So that's exactly what I say in the last slide, that projectiology is the main paratechnology, is the main instrument for the conscientiology study. Okay, let's go ahead to the next one, please.
All right.
Would you like to explain this one?
Well, in the page 38 of the book, you may find a synoptic table of subdisciplines. In this page and in this chapter, Professor Waldo, he shows the possibility of organization of conscientiology in different subjects of study. Each original subject or object of study may create a new subdiscipline. So in the book, Professor Waldo, he shows the possibility of structuration of conscientiology in 70 subdisciplines. But right now, we have hundreds of subdisciplines. But in the book, Professor Waldo, he calls attention that a few subdisciplines are very, very interesting. And he shows that they are very original. For instance, conscientiocentrology, consciential therapy, cosmoethics, existential programmology, holomaturology, macrosomatics, paragenetics, serenology, dosinology. So you will not find those subjects in conventional science. Those subjects, they came to us from conscientiology. They are very original. So if you as a researcher, if you may choose a new subject of study, you may create a new subdiscipline. And if your object of study is very original, that's great. So you may create a wholly new field of study. And this way, in the conscientiological community, new institutions were developed around new objects of study. So a new subdiscipline, it may create a whole new great field of study. You may write a book, you may build an institution. So this idea from Professor Waldo to organize conscientiology in subdisciplines, this is a scientific way of thinking, but more than that, it shows us a broader way to organize the development of our lives, of our studies, of our way of thinking about our future. What should I like to dedicate myself in my future? What kind of object of study may I choose? So this chapter, I think that it brings to us this kind of proposition. So, Tony?
Can go ahead. Chapter 5 is around the essential concepts in projectiology. So I would like to highlight the idea of projection is not only about the projection of the consciousness, but also about the projection of energies. So in the page 44, you can find the definition of projectiology. And when we combine these two types of projection, consciousness, the projected consciousness, and when you put our energies outside of our body in a different ways, we can have a plethora, multiple phenomena. So we also study this phenomena. There are dozens of phenomena, dozens of types of projections in the next chapters in further debates here in this study. So what is most important for us to understand is the lucid projection, the level of awareness, the lucidity we have around this phenomena. So this is something essential for us to make this technology, this astrophysical technology works. Otherwise, we have no understanding, no lucidity, no access to these extraphysical perceptions. So as Ulysses said in the beginning, the projection of consciousness is something that we know for millennia, for centuries. Projectiology is a very new science, or the systematization of this study. And one thing the Professor Waldo presents in the book is that one of the main goals of projectiology is fill the gaps of the knowledge we have in terms of this phenomena. So if you have a look in details in the book, you will find dozens of hypotheses, dozens of temporary explanations or attempts to explain a lot of things. For example, the golden cord, the mental soma, the paraphysiology. There's a lot of things that you need to understand in terms of projectiology, how this phenomenon really works in terms of the connection to the brain. So there's a lot of gaps that you need to understand and research in projectiology. And it's something obvious, but the book we have, Projectiology, is or represent the foundations or the main source of information we have nowadays in terms of systematization of the science. So this is the international reference, and luckily we have this in English to spread these ideas for the whole international community, the scientific community, to access and create debates around that. Let's go ahead.
Okay, the chapter number 6 is dedicated to terminology. And I remember when Professor Waldo once told me that the only novelty in this dimension is the neologism, the new word. New ideas, or any idea, move through time carried by a word. So the words are very, very important to take knowledge through time. And new phenomena, they requires new words. It is impossible to develop new science without using new words, a new terminology. And the terminology is the way that we may understand what another scientist is saying. So if we can reduce the gap between terminology and the understanding of the phenomena, we will move toward expansion of consciousness and the understanding of the phenomenological world. Imagine if someone uses a word that you don't understand very well. And together with that, if you don't understand the phenomenon very well, but in another way, if the term is precise and if the comprehension of the phenomenon is good, so you are moving towards a better understanding and your consciousness will have a great benefit of that. So terminology is very important for you, for us, to go inside the phenomenon. When Professor Waldo wrote this book, Projectiology, he was proposing a few new words. But through the last few years, Professor Waldo developed thousands of new words. And he wrote a new dictionary. It's called Dicionário de Neologismos da Conscienciologia. It is published in Portuguese. So it is the Conscientiological Dictionary of Neologisms. In this book, Professor Waldo puts his great contribution in terms of science, in terms of creating a new point, a new landmark in our world where a new way of thinking is beginning. If you can imagine the history of our planet, you may find that in some regions of the planet, in some moment in history, new ideas could rise. So right now, Conscientiology is giving this kind of contribution, especially here in Brazil, where all those knowledge is being developed. Right now, we are living in Iguaçu Falls, and here we have the Holoteca and a lot of laboratories. So there is a place, a region, a localization where this terminology is growing. This kind of phenomenon in our planet is very important. The terminology, it rises somewhere. And if you think about the history of the planet, for instance, if you think about the Greeks, a lot of new ideas and new words, they came to us from Greece. You see, there is a place. So Conscientiology also, it's growing in special places in our planet. That's very important. Our books, when they are published, there is the city where the book is published, you see? So there is a link between terminology, the region where it rises, because we are working together with extraphysical communities that help us to develop those ideas. So terminology is a kind of object of study of great value, because through terminology, the knowledge will move through time. And so we are all invited to look to the new phenomena, the new experiences, and for us to look for new words to express our new experiences. So I think that that's the message that Professor Waldo he tried to give us in this chapter. So those was my last words. Right now, we would like to invite you all for a discussion, right? Tony, Kim, please.
Thank you, Tony and Ulysses. Thank you very much. Please, everybody, comments or questions, just leave a note in the chat, just indicating that you would like to make a comment or ask a question, so we know, and then I'll just call on you, whoever puts in. You don't have to write it all out, just let us know, and then we'll get to you. And as you know, at the moment nobody has mentioned anything, so I would, there's a question or sort of a comment that I would be interested in getting your perspectives on, Tony and Ulysses and anybody else. As you were talking, and I think it was early on, talking about the concept of science and the importance of evidence as part of the scientific method, it just struck me that because the experience is such an important piece of evidence in conscientiology, but the experience, at least in a way that is conscious and acknowledged, appears to be limited at this point to among humanity to a smaller sort of subsection of humanity. And even then, within many people, there are many people who have experiences but bring all kinds of different religious perspectives or so on to them. It just struck me that for conscientiology to be sort of taken up as a mainstream science, there needs to be a tipping point where there's a large enough number of people who have out-of-body experiences, for example, and are open to interpreting them in a scientific way. And until we get to that point, it's going to stay in the fringes. That was just what arose for me during listening to you. And I'd be curious for your reflection or comment.
Ulysses?
Well, our challenge is to make science. As you said, Kim, everyone has experiences. But to be a scientist in terms of out-of-body experience, it means to look for foundations, to look for methodology, to communicate your experiences, to communicate with other scientists, with different institutions, to travel around the world and to discuss with different people. That is to make science, you see? And also to make good questions, to show results. We must show results on our researches. If we are only dedicated to share experiences, that's not science, okay? A mystical approach can do it very well. And a mystical approach can deal with high level in terms of self-experimentation. Self-experimentation alone may be used by a mystical person in a high level with very, very good experiences and original. But to develop science, it takes a new responsibility on knowledge, to share this knowledge, to make it useful, and to make it systematic. So the difference in the scientific approach is that to make it systematic, to make it useful to other people, to discuss, to share, and to see our own our lack of knowledge, our questioning. You see, not only the experience itself, but our intellect applied over the experience. So I think that the scientific approach is really very important to be understood and to make difference. Exclude the scientific way of thinking. We can talk in a marvelous way about our experiences. You see, it's great. But the scientific approach is completely different of that. It's to develop a systematic way of work. Okay?
Thanks, Ulysses. Yeah. We've got a question here from Adina.
Oh, yeah. My question is if a scientist, a materialistic scientist without any lucidity about multidimensionality could be completist. So let's say he has in his existential program to discover a cure for an illness, let's say. He discovers that that cure, a medicine, I don't know, but in the current life, he has no connection, no lucidity with multidimensionality. Is he a completist? Does he complete his existential program even if he has no connection with, let's say, with projectiology, with conscientiology?
I would say that there are a concept of serendipity, which is something very common in science, which means sometimes a lot of discoveries happen by accident. There are extraphysical forces that control a lot of scientific discovery as well. And the scientist, as a human being, is not alone, is surrounded of helpers, especially if he's helping to develop a vaccine that will help a lot of millions of people, like the pandemic you are seeing nowadays. So I think there is a high level of multidimensionality in science, even in the materialistic science. But the point is, as you said, some scientists have no notions around that, but they are like, they have interactions via logics, the rational thoughts with these extraphysical helpers, with these extraphysical researchers as well. And it lead to me, remember me one idea I had when I was studying these chapters, which is something that can help us to understand the methodology of projectiology. I was thinking about friendship. I think we need to create something very innovative in terms of methodology. And friendship can be something essential for projectiology. So pick a friend, build friendships, make new friends, and select those that have more affinity with these extraphysical ideas, and start doing techniques together. So start practice these techniques together. So this can be a way for developing new methodologies, because we can, first of all, exclude or at least work with the distortions of self-interpretations of this phenomenon, especially when two friends, for example, are having similar or projections at the same time, okay? But most important than that is when your friend or yourself pass away and become an extraphysical consciousness, in the last case scenario, you will have an extraphysical helper that will help you with the development of this projection. So I can talk by my own experience. When I start study projectiology and study the book decades ago, when I was a teenager, my father, he had a very self-discipline in terms of doing these techniques. We practice projective techniques every other night in a very disciplined way for months, and it really works. And the level of projectability we developed was very good in terms of extraphysical lucidity. My father passed away ages ago, and now I can affirm that my level of projectability is improved because he's helped me in terms of extraphysical lucidity, you know. So think in terms of science is not a single, is not something that you do alone. It's something that you do with people, with friends. We need more friendship, and this can be perhaps one important key for us to develop projectiology. So let's think about that. I think this is something very interesting for us to create very innovative and completely different ways for developing new methodologies and doing science of projection of consciousness. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I think we must think a little bit more about new ways or new approaches, or put this complex phenomena in a scientific model or scientific approach.
So we've got to move on to the technique section. It's just before a last comment from Ana Paula.
I promise I'll be very brief. I think I agree with what Ulisses said about we create a methodology, we expand this opportunity of research and make science. And also agree with Tony said about create groups where we can develop that and so on. But I think we need create a form to research, like make science, research, questionnaires, polls, because what I see, there is a big gap. Science is trying to explain so many events that people experience. People are looking for all sorts of substances to generate altered state of consciousness in order to have some sensations. And when they have, the only way they can explain what's happening with them is through the conventional science. So my point is, I think it's very important we create a way that we can produce articles, we can, even though they are producing now Conscientia and so on, but expanded more and do more intersections with other psychology. And but as a result of an investigation, we have an advance that we have lots of people around the world. And so we can bring more information into that. We can bring light into that when we use the experience that the people have. It's not necessarily that they are having a lucid projection, but at least something they are having and some experience. And we can research through those questionnaires and through the flying, through experience, practical experience. But I think it's important we act more into that and publish more, talking more about the consciential paradigm, parapsychism especially, and also the principle of disbelief. I think those main things are important, that people know that such a thing exists.
You are completely right. Yes, you are completely right. The global community is waiting for us. That's all.
Okay. All right, good. I think we need to move on now. So we've got, what have we got? We've got, yeah, 13 minutes. So we will actually spend a bit of time in the breakout rooms.
So as Ulises and Tony have mentioned, you know, having a methodology is an important part of the scientific approach, and using techniques can really facilitate our experiences and our projections or out-of-body experiences. And as Tony mentioned, sometimes it takes months of applying a technique to notice a difference. So what we thought we'd do was every month we will present a technique for us to practice as a group. And over time, you know, we can take note of which technique works better for us. Last month we started off, we proposed two foundational techniques. And so the challenge for this month would be to choose one of those techniques and to really apply it, put it into practice this month. And of course, record all of your experiences within the forum, and also in your projective diaries. So I'll just post the two techniques here in the chat. We have the psychophysiological self-relaxation technique and the rhythmic respiration technique. Okay, so the aim again is for you to choose one and to really focus on it over the next month. So we'd like to thank the facilitators, Tony and Lisa. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge on this important topic, and for everyone for participating in the discussion and bringing your questions and comments. It was really, really good. And we'd like to just remind you of our next meeting, which will be on the 15th of May. And that will be on chapters 7 to 16. So we're going to continue our discussion on the scientific foundations of conscientiology. And we will have two new facilitators, Kim McCall and Tatiana Mota. Okay, so we invite everyone to come to that meeting. But in the meantime, please join the forum, continue your discussions, and continue to share your experiences there. Magali, Kim, did you have anything else, or Tony, Ulises, anything else to say?
No, just thank you, everyone. And just remind that we have a WhatsApp to send the information to you, anyone that wants to participate. And also, if you need any question, anything, you can send us a message, email also.
Well, thank you all once more. I hope I can join the next meeting too. And I also hope that this work will grow. It's really a very good initiative. I think that we all may put together our effort to help this work to grow. It's really very important for us. And it should be very interesting if we could gather people from different institutions from to make this debate bigger, as Ana Paula said too. So I would like to congratulate you all. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, well,
Tony,
thanks everybody.
something. I think Tony.
Can you hear me now? Thank you very much for the opportunity to share and discuss these ideas. I think when we study this book alone is one thing, but when you share and collect and listen to others, it's completely different. We have Ulises and myself had a lot of discussions, and we understand a different approach of that. So I think it's something very interesting. I was an instructor of Projectiology 8 years ago, but now after a lot of experience in my life, I can say that this is another book for me. So, and another opportunity to review new ideas and from new experiences. So I think the bridge is something amazing in terms of update, new insights around the projectiology. This is a very important science to develop our Proexis, our extension program. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope I can see you in the next meetings and next debates.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.